Hi everybody, I'm Laura Kortner.
And I'm Dr. Bob Hieronymus.
And we're here for another episode of the Yellow Submarine University. So this is part of our exploration into the Beatles' Yellow Submarine, on which we've written 2 books now. Volume 2 has just come out last year. Volume 1 came out in 2002. But what we're going to talk about today is what we've learned from readers of our books since Volume 2 came out. We've had some very interesting emails.
Sure have.
Discovered some new things.
Very smart people
that
out there.
We thought you'd like to know. Very smart people out there,
Yeah.
especially the fans of Pepperland, don't you know?
Yeah.
Because they're interested in symbols and color and love music and magic like we are.
I wonder why they do that.
Because they've been infected by the Beatles.
Well, the Beatles are good symbols.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the best symbols we've ever had on this planet.
Uplifting and love infusing. So I think the most interesting historically thing that we've discovered is something that the whole world discovered at the same time back in October, when the Beatles Apple Corps put out a special edition of the Revolver album that included a lot of outtakes and special behind the scenes things that were about the making of that album. And the most important thing to us especially was the first version of Yellow Submarine.
Yes.
And it was revelatory because it was John's song. Part of it was John's song. And the history of that song has always been that was a Paul McCartney song that he dreamed up in the middle of the night.
That's the way we were told.
Even John, I think, agreed with that in history retellings before. That was a Paul song. But clearly, as they're working it out, the very first part of the melody, in the place where I come from, or in the town where I come from, he changes it. It's very melancholy. And he says, what does he say? No one cared, no one cared.
Yes, I was surprised at that.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people cared.
Yeah, well, that was the era when he was writing Nowhere Man. I'm a real nowhere man. Nobody listens, and I'm all by myself. So I can understand why he had that feeling. But it's interesting that he had that song, which was melancholy in a minor key, and then he mixed it with what Paul was working on about living in a yellow submarine, and eventually gave him permission to take over that part of the song and turn it into what we know today.
Frankly, in part, if there weren't 2 of us working on this, I don't know if we would have learned this.
Same with the Beatles.
That's right.
They were the yin to the yang.
Yeah.
I saw a comment underneath the video of somebody said that Paul was John's Prozac because he kept uplifting him. And Giles Martin, the producer, George Martin's son, says something in his comment that even in the songs that came out soon after that, it's getting better all the time, Paul McCartney. It can't get much worse, John Lennon. So it's this black-white, yin-yang. They work together perfectly, that harmony that they were just realizing after the Beatlemania had died down and they were in the studio. They still had that thing going that was a mixture of the 2 of them together that was unlike anybody else.
That's called love.
Yeah. Should we take a look?
Sure.
This is so interesting to me. All right, let's see if I can get that to play.
What do you think he meant when he said no one cared?
Yeah. Well, I think that it's pretty self-explanatory. No one cared. I don't think that's symbolic of anything.
Well,
I think he's... Go ahead.
I don't know if no one cared. A lot of people cared, but he just didn't know it. Which means it's something he needs to work on.
Referring to his childhood.
Yes.
He had a self-expressed, very sad childhood, although it was happier than many. I like the way he noodles around within the name and If You Run. He's clearly still figuring out what the lyrics are. And then the second part that they released has Paul McCartney working with him. And they talk in the middle, as they were wont to do, and joke around. Shall we take a look at that one?
Please do.
Okay, because this is a little bit longer. Let's see if I can call that one up. They harmonize, and by this time it's jauntier, and all the words are here. You can hear the man who sailed the sea told me of his life in the land of submarines. So that part's changed, but they're still doing. They go yellow, and then they have this little lookout in the middle of the lyric of the chorus. So let's see what this one looks like.
Turn it up then. No, I haven't been singing it. Hello? Yes, you have. No, I haven't. No, come on, chaps, now cut it out. We gotta get a song done. Jack, take it over now.
Take one, Jack. Take it over now. I love hearing them talk in between. That's so funny. It reminds me of the Goons, doesn't it? But the fun part about this is nobody had ever heard about this before.
That's
It
right.
had never come out on a bootleg. It hadn't been rumored. Giles Martin, the producer, says, yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Yellow Submarine is one of the most famous Beatles songs, but certainly not one of the most respected Beatles songs. I always think of these little things that you find as sketches, like you go to an art gallery and you see sketches before the painting's done, and sometimes those sketches are surprising because they're not how they should be. And this is one of the ones just like that. I always thought Yellow Submarine was written by Paul and then given to Ringo.
Right.
I didn't realize it was a collaboration. And this is John doing Yellow Submarine, and it's quite sad. It's like the submarine is sinking, but it's lovely. I think what's fascinating about that demo is that it's in 3/4, and in the place where I was born, no one cared, is a very sad sentiment. But the demo shows kind of in real time the unfolding of the drama, if you like, of Lennon and McCartney, that sort of interplay between one person who is coming from one place and another person coming from another place. And yet there's a symbiotic collaboration which is unquestioning about the direction they're going to go in. There's a trust that happens between the two of them. Paul obviously transforms the song into Yellow Submarine. John completely accepts that. And this is during Revolver, obviously, but we hear that same dynamic on the next album, Sgt. Pepper's, where Paul has this endless enthusiasm of singing, "It's getting better all the time," and John sings, "It can't get much worse," back. That's the way they were. And I think this whole Revolver album is them being individuals. But they have complete empathy for each other's talents, and they're not challenged by their individuality, if that makes sense. They realized that the Beatlemania monster that had expired, and they'd become 4 individuals, but they knew that the DNA they had together created a sound that no other band could do, and it created a number of sounds. The demo feel of Yellow Submarine is very different from the album feel where Ringo does it, and they later managed to sort of turn it into this song, sort of swing pop song that suits Ringo. So transformation, we talk about that a lot in our books, don't we? Transformation.
Yeah. I'm glad you pointed that out.
Mm-hmm.
As a matter of fact, I think it's part of it's almost as important as has been emphasized of love. It's almost more than that.
Mm-hmm.
It is more or less an attachment to a way of living, and it's hopeful because perhaps the Beatles, I don't know if they are paying any attention in the world today as to what's going on, but the whole planet is in very difficult trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And it must be, to them, it must be very difficult because they've always been positive about this. Did they make a mistake? No, they didn't make a mistake. But it's the kind of thing that I think that elevates consciousness over long periods of time so that people can work together instead of opposing one another.
That's the Beatles.
That's right.
They had
That's
a lot
right.
of very deep and not so happy thoughts in their songs, but I think if their job, if you will, was to put together little nuggets of uplifting, inspirational poetry, and that's why they're remembered so well. And yet in their private lives, anti-war movement, very active, and Paul very active in the environmental movement and the clean food movement, so they've certainly used their platforms to good. I'm sure that they are concerned about the evolution of the planet, and yet their songs are all about inspiring people to do that in their own lives, to find the transformative power of love,
Mm-hmm.
which is what we talked about in our books. And yeah, I think that that's what we learned from this song. Again, it's the combination of what works together. They found what worked together between the two of them. And John was able to give that over to Paul in such a way that he completely either forgot or just didn't matter to him to correct people when they said it was a Paul song.
Mm-hmm.
To say, no, I came up with the first part of that.
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty cool. So let's see if there's anything else I wanted to make sure we talked about. I think that is something you should check out on YouTube. And of course, I want to make sure we mention where you can buy our books. YellowSubmarineBook.com, because we have way more than you'd ever think you needed to know about the Yellow Submarine. And
And we got so many
life
things.
itself.
We got so many things that we'd like to give away.
that's true. And
That's
each
right.
time you order a book, you check out that bonus market link, and you can get a free prize as well. So, yellowsubmarinebook.com. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Yellow Submarine University.